Good morning and welcome to today's Reactivity and Dog webinar. My name is Katie. I am the owner and trainer at For Pete's Sake Dog Training. And this is going to be a fun little webinar for us to get to the bottom of reactivity in dogs. Very quickly, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am a CPDT-KA certified dog trainer, which means that I went to the Council for Professional Dog Trainers and was examined, you have to put in a certain amount of hours to get certified. You have to also pass their test to a certain degree. So I am certified with them. I also have to have continuing education every couple of years with them to keep my certification and abide by their ethics. So if you are in the market for a trainer, I highly suggest doing your research on your trainers, see where they've studied, if they are certified, who are they certified with, look into that company they're certified with and their ethics, and generally just go talk to trainers to get to know them. In reality, I'm going to be focused on training my clients. The dogs are going to have training as well, but I'm really focused on helping pet parents understand their dogs, understand the whys and the hows that we go through training. Outside of training dogs, I got my certification in 2020, so this is year number 4 for me on being certified. I've worked previously in the dog training world to get those hours, as well in learning dog body language and communication through dog daycare for a number of years. And I have also trained other animal species. So I worked at a couple different zoos. In the last wildlife park I worked at, I was training with a lot of different animal species, and it really honed in on my training experience because there's a lot of problem solving involved when you're working with different animal species. And I was able to take my training experience and really expand it, which is helping me in the dog training world, because dog training has a lot of problem solving. And that's probably why you're here, is to solve problems that you might be having with your dog, especially when it comes to reactivity. So for today, if my computer will work, sorry guys. I forgot to check where my floating head's going to sit. We are going to talk about reactivity. What is it? Why is it happening in our dog? And especially, why does it continue to happen? And how do we go about fixing it? So there's a lot of different aspects we're going to get into with this today. As always, let's start with a definition. I think I can move this over here now. And reactivity in dogs, really what that means is when a dog becomes over aroused by a certain stimuli. I will also use the word trigger, and you hear a lot of trainers use the word trigger. So that's where your dog is encountering something that is building up their emotions, and they are reacting based on those emotions, what's going through their head in that situation. Majority of this emotion is fear. So you may notice that I'm not going to say the word aggressive throughout this presentation unless I'm specifically quoting somebody else using the word aggressive. Because dogs, when they are reacting, they're not being aggressive in a way that we interpret the word aggressiveness. It can look aggressive in some of these situations, but dogs are very much reacting out of fear. And when we talk about fear reactivity, and I'm sorry if I'm not sure when I'm sharing my screen what you can see and what I'm seeing because it's my computer. I apologize if that last sentence got cut off, but we consider the fight response as reactivity. So dogs who are barking, lunging, growling, things like that. That is the sole reaction in reactivity. There's actually 4 other responses to fear, and I do consider those reactivity. We just seem to think or interpret the fight response is more of a problem because it does look aggressive. So I'm usually getting clients who have reactive dogs in the sense that they are using their fight instinct or fight reaction when they're in proximity to those triggers. So I'm definitely going to go over all of the responses in reactivity. A lot of it we're going to talk about today is going to be in response to fight mode, which is probably why you are here today. So let's talk about first, when do dogs react? And if you are joining, feel free to type in the chat when your dog reacts and whatever that reaction is while you're here today. When are they doing it? So for example, the top 3 that I get are people, dogs, or objects. And again, this is usually the reactive mode of the fight mode, where they're barking, lunging, growling. And it's usually directed towards maybe people, if you have guests coming over into your house, if you're on a walk with your dog and there's other dogs in their backyards, or even other dogs at the park with you, or maybe even objects. So maybe you have kiddos at home and they have a remote controlled car and your dog starts growling and barking at it. Maybe it's your vacuum cleaner at home. Maybe they are chasing kids on bikes, or I have clients whose dogs chase cars and they are reactive towards moving objects. Moving tends to be the most common, but it's not always the case either. A lot of those moving objects get that a little bit of the reactivity, unsureness, fearfulness, with a little bit of prey drive in there as well. I'm not going to dive into that too much, but like I said, if your dog's reactive, feel free to in the chat to pop up with what your dog's reactive with. Walking dogs, other dogs on walks, people coming into the house, and people walking past your windows, all very, very common. So here are, again, more examples for you, a little bit more specific. So instead of being high level as people, dogs, objects, I get a lot of clients who are coming to me with reactive dogs when they are on walks. Maybe they are at the vet. They're in their car, so that your dog's in your car with you, and you could be driving through town and they bark at everything. Maybe they're in the park, you're in a parking lot and they're barking at things, which I actually use in part of my training programs. Maybe at home, whether that's, again, guests coming into your home, or they look out windows and they bark at things out the window in your front yard or your backyard. So if you have a fenced in backyard and you're like, they just bark at everything back there, the neighbor dogs, when neighbors come out, whatever it may be. Maybe my house, so I've moved a lot, side note, I lived in Colorado for a while and I actually didn't have a backyard, I had a front yard. And some people also may have tie outs in their front yards. They may have a fenced in backyard. You may have a tie out in your front yard that you also take your dog out to get different scenery. And maybe they're reactive in the front yard, but not the backyard, right? My house in Colorado, I had a picket fence, and the back part of my house was like an alley where was my garage. So my yard went on the sides of my house and the front. So there's a lot of activity in the front side of my house, and especially only having a 3-foot picket fence, it made things a little bit more viewable. You may take your dog to the groomer, and your groomer may tell you that your dog is reactive or your dog is doing certain behaviors while at the groomer, or your dog may be reactive when they're just laying on the couch or on the bed. Maybe they're laying on the couch, you come to sit next to them and they growl, snap, they bark. If they're laying in the bed and you come to get in the bed and they're doing those same reactions. So all of that is reactivity. And there's, again, numerous other examples of when your dog may react. But here's kind of a lot of the common ones that I'm getting as a dog trainer from my dog clients when they're reaching out. So I want to talk to you next about why. Why do our dogs react? Why do they continue to react, even when maybe we're trying different things to help them not react? And you can see in this photo here that this is a dog who is having their lips curled, so either growling, getting ready to bite, ears are tucked back. You can see that frown on their, on their forehead, wrinkling, their body's pretty low. I can't really see his tail, but I assume it looks more down. But this is a prime example of a dog reacting to a vacuum. And that's something that we get a lot of in the dog world, is that your dogs may not like your vacuum. It could be its loudness, it could be the movement, it could be if it has lights on the front of it. So my dog actually, in particular, it doesn't really like the lights on the vacuum. So if I cover those up and then I work with him on training, then that can help that situation. So we're going to dig into both of these for a little bit here. So remember I mentioned that there are 5 responses to fear. And I want to mention all of these because these are all reactivity. Again, reactivity is how your dog reacts or responds to a stimuli or a trigger. That's all it is. It is a response to a trigger. Now, again, we are probably seeing more of the fight response, and that's what I'm getting more contact with because that seems to be more of a problem than some of the other ones. So a lot of what we talk about today will be the fight response, but I still want to acknowledge and to let people know that training is still involved in these other 4 responses, and they may kind of surprise you in a way, or you may not think of this as being reactive. So the next one I want to talk about is flight. So we do, in the human world, we talk about human responses to stimuli or being startled is fight or flight instinct, right? I always use the example of, you see videos online of people who are at, sorry, I just want to check my phone to make sure no one's contacting me. People who are at haunted houses and they get startled, and you have the people who run away, that's flight, or the people who throw in a punch because it's their instinct, that's fight. And that is a very similar process that's going through your dog's brain. Now here you can see some cute little dogs hiding under the blanket. I want to point out to you that the little wire Jack Russell mix, the more white with brown spots, looks a little bit more relaxed to me than the other puppy next to him. And the main thing I'm seeing are those wide eyes on those puppy, the tight mouth, the wired hair, Jack Russell mix here looks more relaxed to me, especially just in the face and the ears. You can't really see the ears because the blanket's covering it up on our other puppy. But I would assume that this puppy, might have this flight reaction where they go and hide. A lot of the times I see this on greetings. So when guests are coming into your house, if your dog is greeting people and other dogs on walks, they move their body away from the situation. A lot of times they may tuck their tail, they make their body a little bit smaller. They actually can physically go and hide, maybe if it's somewhere in your house, but they are moving their body away from the stimulus. Versus when we're in fight mode, we're more directing our body language at the trigger. Flight mode, they want to create space. And sometimes we actually see a combination of these in our dogs throughout their process of interpreting their fear response and to a trigger. So I have dogs who are more fighters in their reactivity, but there are also times where they will actively build space to move away. Now, it may not look the same as tail tucked sprinting away from something that I'm terrified of, right? But they will use their flight instinct to move away from the trigger as well. So fight and flight seem pretty common. Most of us understand those. Freeze is, I held up 2 fingers. That's number 3, freeze. Freeze is what you think of it, where a dog stiffens up, right? A lot of the times, freeze will then lead to a different response. And 9 times out of 10, it tends to be fighting because we freeze a lot before we will react with maybe a bite or using our mouth or something in that way. So freezing is when a dog gets very stiff, and usually you have other body language cues. Eyes are wide, ears are back, tail might be under. Sometimes I see this a lot in my small dogs right before they're about to get picked up by their owner. Is their owner bends down, which is very intimidating for dogs. They go to pick, their owner picks them up. They don't really think anything of it, and their dog is frozen. There's a difference between, okay, I'm just going to stand still for you to pick me up, and you can see more relaxation body language in the dog versus, oh, they're bending towards me. Oh gosh, I'm about to get picked up. Let me deal with it, and then I get picked up. So a lot of times when dogs are freezing, in a way, they're kind of shutting down and they're just saying, okay, let me just stay frozen and wait for this to be over with. And they're not actually okay with it. And like I said, a lot of the times when dogs freeze, we can get other reactions after that, especially if the trigger continues maybe invading their space or continues in the direction that they're uncomfortable with. So a lot of the times I see freezing happening before I have growls or barks or things, or even freezing and then something else happens and they jump and they sprint and they run and hide. So that is a fear response, and it's usually paired with others. The fourth one, got my numbers right, fidget. This one can be surprising to people, as well as the fifth one, fawning. Fidget, I think of fidget as when we are anxious and we have to tap our fingers and click a pen. So it is a fear response, a little bit more, in the anxiety world, and it can be jumping. Jumping because you are afraid is a thing. And it seems weird because there are times when dogs, I'm going to use the example of guests coming over. A lot of the times we see dogs jumping on people as strictly excitement, and that is not always the case. Your dog can be going through these emotions that are conflicting in their brain, where they're kind of excited, but also like, who are you? I don't know who you are, especially if it's someone they haven't really met before. If it's someone they've met numerous amounts of times, I'm sure it's pure excitement at that point. But especially when we're meeting someone new, we can be overstimulated with emotions and unsure. I always say unsurety. I don't even know if that's a real word, but when your dog's slightly unsure about the person, they can still be jumping. They can still be pacing, is also fidgeting. So if they may not be showing the fight, flight, anything like that, that's very noticeable, but pacing is also fidgeting. So anything that they're still having anxiety in their brain, but they are using movement to try and figure out that emotion, sometimes they will use this to try and help calm themselves down from that fear and uncertainty response. So fidgeting can kind of be, it can be hard to determine sometimes if a dog is doing excessive behaviors because they're overly excited or because they're fearful. And like I said, a lot of the times it's a combination. It's not just one or the other. So that's something that I keep in mind when I'm working with those dogs. And fawning is when a dog actually rolls over. And actually, I'm getting way ahead of myself. I forgot I had pictures here. So flight, hiding, we've talked about that. Fawning, here's a picture, a dog rolling over. And a lot of the times we think that when a dog is greeted by another dog or a person and they roll over to show their belly, a lot of the times we use the word submissive in that. And yes and no. I try and stay away from the word submissive because it's usually paired with dominance, and that's also our human definition of these words is not fully correct. Fawning, when a dog rolls over, they're pretty much saying, I mean no harm, I come in peace, is what they're saying. So you may say, yeah, that's submissive, but it is a response to being uncomfortable. So it's not just like, oh my gosh, I love you, rub my belly, like I'm okay. Sometimes dogs will have their tails still tucked to cover themselves in this. If you notice this picture of the dog fawning, our eyes are kind of squinting shut, our ears are pinned back, and our mouth is still tight. We can't see the tail, but this is going to tell me that this dog may be just on a little bit more on the uncomfortable side, and that they're pretty much saying, I just come in peace. Like, I just don't even want to start anything, right? So this is a fear response, and it's one that we have to just make sure we're interpreting this correctly, and that we're helping our dog through this. So I'm not saying every single time your dog rolls over and shows their belly that they're extremely fearful, right? But it is a body language response to being unsure or a little bit fearful of a situation, especially if it's another dog. We see this a lot with other dogs, and this is a response for that. Fidgeting, I have this, here a picture of a guy with the dog. Honestly, this picture I put up because I'm kind of 50-50 on if the dog is fully excited. I would rather see a video of this than just a picture. Pictures can be really hard to determine the rest of the body language that we have going on. But his ears are a little bit tucked back. His eyes look a little bit wide, but his mouth is open. But if it's going to close to tighten up, that's another story, right? Here's our photo of a dog that I would consider could be freezing. However, he could be doing a chin rest behavior. Again, pictures are kind of sometimes hard to see. But if I notice his ears are tucked back, His eyes are a little bit on the wider side too, and his mouth is closed shut and might be a little bit tight. So I see sometimes this is the face I'll see in a dog right before someone reaches over to go pet them on their head, which is a whole other topic, because I don't like to do that, and I like to educate people that we shouldn't be greeting dogs that way all the time. But anyway, so you do see this freeze body language come up as well. And like I said, fight is the one that we're probably here. Most of us are here because our dog is a quote fighter when they respond to fear. So your next question is, why do dogs continue to react? So you may say, I've tried talking to my dog. I tell them it's okay. They keep doing it. And long story short, it's reinforcement. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times when dogs are reacting, there's naturally occurring reinforcements that are happening that we may not realize is actually reinforcing this reactive behavior. So, as an example, we have a dog in a car. And if you said, when my dog's in the car, he barks at people and other dogs that are passing by us, or maybe we're passing by them. And this is what I mean by a natural reinforcement. When a dog is unsure and they are reacting with barking, growling, lunging, what they're trying to do is scare that thing away so it doesn't come any closer. That's really what they're doing. They're kind of like a tough guy in a bar who's like, I could fight anybody. And then by the time that time comes around where someone challenges them, they're like, okay, wait. So they're just trying to be the tough guy, right off the bat, just to scare the thing away. Now, when your dog's in the car, and let's just say you're parked and people are walking by your car, same thing if your dog barks out the window of your house at someone walking by, they bark, the person or the dog keeps walking by because that person is on a joyous walk for the day. Your dog doesn't understand that that person will continue walking no matter what they do. So naturally, they're barking at the thing who continued to walk away and leave and not come any closer, worked. Their brain goes, I am tough. I scared them away and they didn't come back. So that is a natural reinforcement. If your dog barks on walks and there's a dog way over there and they're barking at it and they continue walking their own path, or if you turn around and go the other way, which I do use on occasion, and that's a whole training thing, but reinforcement, it was reinforced. That dog didn't come closer. And I'm not telling you to just, if you're working on this, to say, okay, then the object needs to continue to come closer. That's not what I'm saying. There's a lot more to it. So I don't mean to confuse you, because if that thing keeps coming closer, their body language and their reactiveness to the thing can escalate. So I just wanted to talk about natural reinforcers that sometimes when our dog barks, the world reinforces that barking without our control. So that's a lot of the times why it will continue to happen. So how do we fix it then, if the world's just naturally reinforcing it? I highly suggest that you find a professional, especially if you feel like your dog you're so overly stressed, it's out of control, you have no idea where to start. Find a professional. I'm glad that you're here today to learn about reactivity. This is a very intense topic, and there's a lot of levels to it. So I highly suggest that you find a professional. At the end of this, I'm going to tell you how you can work with me if you've enjoyed, learning from me today. I do, in person and virtual. So if you're not in my area, that's fine. But a lot of people they're more comfortable with working with someone in person, and I get that, and that's totally fine. So I do want you to find a professional, someone who knows what they're working with. And like I said, research that person, their history, their training, if they're certified, that program they're certified through, and their methods. There's a lot of different methods out there for training, as we know. And I'm not going to tell you there's right or wrong. I have my opinions. You can have your opinions. And that's the joyous part of being a human, is that we all get to have opinions and we can agree to disagree, and that's fine. But find a trainer that you are, what I say, vibing with, because again, trainers should be focused on training you and not your dog. Your dog's going to get training at the same time, but if you don't understand the whys and the hows, it's not going to help you in the long run. I always tell my clients that I'm almost focused on making them a mini version of me, because while it would be a great business plan for me to say, you need me the rest of your dog's life, yeah, the economy isn't set up for that, and people aren't set up for that financially. So I'm trying to teach you the information and the skills that I've learned that will work with your dog. And again, that's where the trainer comes into play, because there's trial and error. Not every dog is the same. I can't say, oh, you have a reactive dog, do 1, 2, 3, and it'll be fixed. Every dog's different, right? So you need to find someone who can work with you, problem solve, and help teach you the ways that will be there for your dog, which leads into training and management. Training and management, you have to use both of these. You can't solely rely on one or the other. And what do I mean? Like training, you know what training means. What do I mean by management? So when I talk about management, I want to use this photo here as an example. I chose this photo of a dog looking at the window. If your dog barks at people looking at the window, if you don't have a management situation in play that can block that window so your dog can't watch people outside and continue to get naturally reinforced, training's going to be a lot harder. So while you're working with a trainer and training with your dog to not bark at people walking up the window, the less opportunity we give our dog to do that, the less it will be naturally reinforced. So if a behavior continues to be reinforced, it's going to be a lot harder to change their mindset on that and to get them training to not do the thing that we're doing. Great example of this outside of reactivity is if your dog is a jumper and it jumps on people. If you continue to touch the dog, or if I'm like, nope, I'm not going to let the dog jump on me, but my husband lets the dog jump on him, it continues to get reinforced and the jumping will not get better because there's something in there that's still reinforcing the jumping. I want to try and make sure that I'm not naturally getting that's not getting naturally reinforced. So you'll hear trainers talk about thresholds a lot. That's a weird word. Thresholds, most of the time when I'm talking about thresholds, it's either distance or time, or it also can be energy of a dog. So different energy levels of dogs, noises can be thresholds. There's a lot to it. When you're talking about, let's say this dog here is in a park and maybe they bark at other dogs, you want to make sure management that you're not putting your dog in a situation where they're going to be super, super reactful, right? When we talk about thresholds, I like to have my clients envision, you know what? I'm going to use this because it's in front of me. This is a line. On this side, it's white. On this side, it's black. And as we get closer to black, it turns gray and then it gets darker. When we're in the dark side, the black colored side, your dog is above threshold and they are barking, they're growling, they're lunging, they're doing whatever they do when they see a trigger. When we're on the white side, your dog's relaxed. There's not much going on. Maybe there's a dog 100 feet away and they see it and they're like, not a threat. So distance is a great one in this example because maybe now the dog is 50 feet away and they're like, oh, I see it. I'm kind of worried about it, but I'm not reacting yet. And the dog is 10 feet away and we're in the black zone and they're reacting to it. We need to be at closest gray, middle into white when we're training with a dog, when we're training them on what we want them to physically do or how we want them to emotionally feel about that situation they're reacting to. We have to be more on the white to gray area. You cannot train a dog when they're in the dark gray to black area of reactivity. You can't. Okay. So that's where management comes in and working with their thresholds, knowing at what point is too much and what's not too much. And you start training in that area. We want to also use high value reinforcement. So again, there's a lot of natural reinforcement already going on and we have to outcompete that. So most of the time that does tend to be food. However, I do have dogs who have certain toys and activities that they really enjoy that we use as well in that training side of their threshold. And honestly, there's not one specific thing I teach dogs to do. There's a lot to it. So, but I do have to use something that will outweigh the difficulty of the situation, because again, we're working with fear and we're working with anxiety, and it is not easy to change those emotions. Even for me as a human, it is very hard to change my anxiety emotions, and just putting me on medications isn't going to do it. I have to put in the work, and I need things that are going to outweigh the heaviness of that anxiety and that fear. So I need to be using high value reinforcements in that. And also with all my clients, I work on confidence building. And I know it seems kind of weird to say, oh, like me working on confidence building with my dog, not in the specific situation that they are reacting to. Why should I do that? Because your dog's an anxious dog, and that there are things that make them uncertain. And there's even potential that just their ability of their own body is causing some of that confidence issues. So if I can build up their confidence in other ways, then that will actually secondhand help them when they're unsure. Just like us and our anxiousness, we need to boost things up in order to help the overall problem. So there are things that I do with dogs that may not be directly with the reactive situation for them, but it's all about building up their personal skills. So confidence building is a huge part of that for me. So I know that was a lot. If you have questions, you feel free. I'm just gonna do a wrap up here. You can type them in the chat. At the end, I'm gonna open it up so people can unmute, but let me know if you have any questions. But I did want to point out, this is my handsome little boy, Pete. He's now 8 years old, and he's a reactive dog. Long story short, I adopted him from a shelter when he was just shy of a year old, and he had been in the shelter for about 5 months. And when we met him, he was shy. He didn't really want to meet us that much. And I'll be honest, I did not want to adopt him because I knew that personality was going to be difficult. And at this point, I was not a dog trainer. Again, this was 8 years ago, almost 7 years ago. My husband, it was his dog, so he picked him out. We took him home, and I'm glad we did. Like, no regrets at this point, but he was not my first choice, and I will admit that. I do believe that if he was adopted by most other people, he probably still wouldn't be on this planet today, because he is a special character. And I did not get the reactiveness until I had him at home for about 3 to 4 months. I took him to work with me. At that point, I worked in an office that allowed you to bring dogs. So he was meeting people, he was meeting some dogs. I didn't get too involved in like dog daycare and stuff because I was letting him still get comfortable in his surroundings. Then at about 3-ish months, he started barking at people and dogs. I'm like, this is new. My office then moved to a new location. I brought him there. That move was just detrimental because he's like, absolutely not. This was not the right environment for him. Couldn't take him to work anymore. He started barking at my neighbors and people coming to visit. So I had to start doing this whole routine of meeting people outside the house. And I was just kind of trying things on my own. Then my husband and I and my whole family moved to Kansas. That was when we were in Colorado. Then we moved to Kansas. And every time we had this big life event, we kind of took steps backwards, right? Moved to Kansas, decided I needed to worked with a professional. I learned so much. And that's where I was working at the wildlife park, training other animals, and decided, you know what, I think being a dog trainer would be wonderful and is my calling. So he is a huge part of me becoming a dog trainer. And his story is one that I think will have people learn about dogs a little bit more, because with his reactivity, the first instinct people go, oh, was he abused? And he wasn't. He was not physically abused. He is genetically anxious, and he was not socialized properly as a puppy. So both of those, when you have those come together, that's usually a big part of why we have this reactiveness in dogs. Without going on a tangent of socialization is huge. And that's why whenever I am working with puppies, I barely work on behaviors. We work on socialization. I can teach behaviors at any time, but to get your dog confident when they're a puppy is way more important. He was not abused. He's just a very introverted dog who thinks the world is out to get him because he's an animal and they have survival instincts. Long story short, I moved again. So I've lived in 4 different houses in his 8 years of life. So he's had a lot of challenges, but he has overcome them so well, and I'm so proud of him. So working with me, if that's something you are interested in, I do have a variety of ways. I have private sessions, like I said, both in person. If you're in the Indianola, Des Moines metro area, I can come to you and work with you. I do offer virtual sessions as well. Virtual, we do have to get a little bit more techie, especially as we start getting deeper into the program where you're going to have to be videoing your sessions that you're doing with your dog, whatever we're working on. And then we can review those videos, especially if they're not at your house and you need to be going, outside on walks and dog parks and things. If they're at your house, we can do a lot of those live together. But private sessions definitely are what I do a lot of those. I do sometimes have some group classes, and both virtually and in person. Those are not as common for me to host those, so those are very far and few in between. I have online, I have self-paced courses. I have a DIY agility course that I love for confidence building, and it's DIY where you don't have to go buy agility equipment. I know I have this tunnel here behind me, which if you want to invest in agility equipment, go for it. But I also have I show ways that you can build your own tunnel at home, and you don't need to go buy anything to be working with your dog and building their confidence and giving them mental stimulation. Lastly, I have a membership, and it's $10 a month for 10-minute training sessions. And we work on anything and everything from cooperative care, so nail trims, looking at ears, getting your dog comfortable and opting in for you to examine them. Again, a lot of confidence building, to working on the basic behaviors. How can we advance those basic behaviors? Really, I'm just trying to give people ideas. If you're like, I want to continue working with my dog, but I don't know what to do, or hey, here's a real life situation I'm struggling with, and posting videos that are like that. I just posted a video of stay while opening a door and going through a door and like what that process looks like. So I have that for you. Lastly, like I said, I have a Facebook page that's for Pete's Sake Dog Training, for like their hair. And my Patreon is the membership. I do have a YouTube channel. Here's my email address if you need to email me about anything. I offer free consultation calls for anyone who's interested in training with me. I do not require you to sign up during the call. I usually will send you a text with a very high level recap of what we talk about. I understand that it is a financial investment when you're working with training. It is. And my expertise, is really what you're putting into that, as well as my time. But really, like I said, I'm focused on training you. I'm becoming your master Jedi. So anyway, the QR code, if you want to scan that will take you to my general website where I have all this information as well. So looks like we don't have any questions. If we do have any questions, we'll open it up if you would like to unmute yourself and we can go into those questions. I didn't see any in the chat, but anyways, thank you for joining, and we can take some questions if you have them.